For all of these reasons, we're excited to welcome Coach Jessie Morgan to Gilman today to speak to us about her life experiences. A native of Baltimore, Ms. Morgan attended the McDonough School from 1st through 12th grade, where she was a standout three-sport athlete who excelled in volleyball, basketball, and lacrosse. She went on to pursue a lacrosse career at the University of Virginia, where she became a national champion, team captain, and All-American defender. She was selected for the U.S. developmental team after college and was voted the 8th best African-American lacrosse player of all time by Lacrosse Magazine. After her playing career, she began coaching at Howard University, which is a historically black college in Washington, D.C. She was eventually called back to her alma mater at Virginia, where she served as assistant coach for 4 years and helped lead the team to a Final Four. Now she is the head coach of the Division I women's lacrosse program at the George Mason University in Fairfax, Virginia. Ms. Morgan holds a bachelor's degree in English from Virginia and an MBA from the George Mason University School of Business. Please join me in welcoming Coach Morgan to Gilman.
Okay, so I heard that lunch is next, so I'm going to try to be as engaging and entertaining as possible. I have 15 minutes approximately, and I'm going to try to go through pretty much my whole life in those 15 minutes and kind of explain myself and kind of where I come from. I wrote an article, which is probably why I'm here, about race and lacrosse. And I'm going to try to give you a little bit of background about why I wrote that article, what lacrosse means to me, and what Baltimore means to me. So let's just get started. Why I came here. Because we have our first game against Monmouth in 6 days. So I'm the head coach. I had to move the moon and the stars to be here at 11 o'clock today. But I knew that when I got the phone call to speak at Gilman, I had to take it because I was where you are sitting right now, and I remember telling myself, man, I hope one day I'm successful enough, established enough, and wise enough to come back to my school and speak at an assembly. Literally. I literally told myself. And in my dream, I was at McDonough, but this is the next best thing. Next best thing, right? Or better, whatever, however you want to think about it. You know? So, you know, I'm so grateful to have this opportunity to speak to you young men today because it really is kind of a part of my life aspiration to kind of speak my story to young men because you guys are actually the future of this city. You know, I graduated a while ago in 2003, and my peers have gone on to become political leaders, teachers, doctors, lawyers in the city of Baltimore, and the city actually means so much to me. I had to take the opportunity to speak to the future leaders, and maybe something that I say today will change a choice that you will make later in life. So that's another reason why I told myself, I don't care what time we're meeting. I don't care what highway I have to drive down to get here. I'm going to be here today. So it really means so much for me to be here in front of you guys today because I think that I'm speaking to the future leaders of Maryland, global leaders, and leaders within our city that, you know, hopefully we all love so dearly. So my framework, when talking about race or bias, it's really important that you have framework because I can't stand up here and speak for every black person in the country. I can only really speak for me and my experience and where I come from. So I'm going to try to give you guys an idea of where I come from and kind of what has made my story. I've always wanted to be a poet. You know, I went to UVA as an English major because I thought that I could change the world with my words. And now that's crazy, but I really did. You know, I used to love poetry, and I loved reading it, and there's political poetry, and there's poets that try to change the world with their words, and I thought that was going to be me. So I'm at UVA studying to be a poet, and I quickly realized that it's very difficult to become a poet, and you know it may or may not involve years of starvation and you know not making a lot of money and things like that. So poetry kind of went out the window, and my path led to lacrosse, a career in coaching lacrosse, which I didn't go to UVA for that either. but that's kind of how things ended up. And now I see how I can create social change and change the world through lacrosse. So, you know, the things that I was not able to do with my poetry, I'm now getting experiences like this or opportunities where I can speak to people and help change Baltimore and the country and social biases and race through the sport of lacrosse. But I know that sounds crazy, but you're gonna soon see why. All right, so I went to McDonough, 1st through 12th grade, private school. You know, when you're in that bubble, you feel like everyone else goes to private school. You know, you think the entire country goes to private school and are in experiences like this, but they're really not. You know, you guys are the few, the proud, the young men that are getting an opportunity that so many kids don't get. You know, and you really need to start to learn to appreciate what you're getting in terms of education and your social surrounding, that you guys are having a very special experience. And I didn't realize that when I was at McDonough. I thought everyone had this same kind of setup where I went to lunch with Sikhs and Jews and black people and white people. We were all mixed up, and, you know, no one really cares about race, and no one really cares about, you know, how much money your family has, even though probably 93% of the kids I went to school with, their family had tons of money. You know, I didn't know any different. So then I go to UVA for 2 reasons. One, because it looked just like McDonough. You know, you go to UVA, they have like big white columns and all the bricks, and it looks like McDonough. Why not go here? It's a great school. And because everyone else that I went to school with wanted to go there. So I got to go early because an athlete, you know, I didn't really have to apply. I played lacrosse. She wanted me. I wanted to go to UVA. I got to go to UVA. And I thought it looked like McDonough, but once I got there, it wasn't. It wasn't Baltimore. It wasn't Maryland. You are now in Virginia, which is the South. And, you know, a crazy part of my whole experience, I'm on my first recruiting visit, first day at UVA. I had never heard a person say the N-word outside of a Biggie song until that day. My first day at UVA, I heard somebody, like, you know, a white kid say to a black kid, like, "You uppity N," and I couldn't believe it. First day at UVA, and it just kind of changed my whole reality. I also saw that here, black people have opportunity in Baltimore. You know, I see, you know, my aunt drives a Mercedes, my mom drives a Lexus. People have 4,000 square foot homes, you know. You go to UVA, black people ride the bus. You know, the only black people I saw worked in the cafeteria. And from a girl from West Baltimore, I wasn't used to that. You know, it was a real shock. It was a culture shock to me. And it was a part of me realizing that, okay, black people don't have the same opportunities everywhere. You know, and Baltimore is a really special place where people get more opportunity than other places. It was also where I was used to being maybe the only person in AP English, the only black person in AP English, but the other people around me weren't used to having me in their AP English. Where my first week in the dorm, my hair was the #1 conversation. You know, how I do my hair, why is it curly, you know, how long does it take to blow dry? Things that I never had to answer to became the #1 topic because they had never seen anyone like me. Remember, I came from a fishbowl of McDonough where diversity's everywhere. Nobody asked me about my hair because they knew 7 other black girls that had the same hair. It wasn't special. But I knew that I was different when I went there because other people made sure that I knew I was different. Let's say I graduate, I go on to life. That's when I realized that black people hang out with black people, white people hang out with white people, Jewish people hang out with Jewish people. Things feel segregated. You know, a part of my experience where I thought I really enriched my life, my wedding party when I got married, you know, 3 dudes, two white people, 2 Jewish people. You know, I got to grow up amongst people who valued diversity. And I think it's something that I really had to reach outside of my comfort zone to attain, that I had to try to attract or be a part of other people's lives that didn't look like me. And that's what enriched my life. You know, I had to go outside of my comfort zone and sit at tables where maybe I was the only black person, or, you know, sit at tables where all Jewish people sat, because I valued that enrichment that I got from learning about other cultures and other people and being diversified. So I have 4 stories that I wanted to get to that kind of helped shape this little article that I wrote. The one story, when I was at Virginia, there was a wrestling coach there, and he wanted to relate to me in terms of me being a blue-collar person. Like, hey, Jesse, we're both very blue-collar, right? And I'm like, okay, yeah, we're both blue-collar. Like, I'm pretty tough, you're pretty tough. And he automatically assumed that I was kind of from the hood, you know? And he started to make comments that, you know, yeah, we both struggled, we're blue-collar, you're from the hood, I'm from the hood. And I was like, wait a minute. You know, I went to McDonough. My grandfather was a doctor. You know, I grew up in a 4,000 square foot home. Like, my family worked hard for me to not have to say that I was from the hood. So for you to assume just because of the color of my skin that I'm from some hood is unfair. Not that I can't help other people or help or appreciate other people's experience. There's nothing wrong with being from a hood, but not every black person you see is from a deprived situation, you know, and other people need to know that and not assume. Another story is I'm at Duke Camp down in North Carolina, and a young lady's driving, and she's asking me to jump out of the car, go into this house. She's gonna raise the garage, and Jesse, run in, grab a lacrosse stick out of the garage, and run back out. And I'm gonna wait here for you in the parked car. And I say, I don't think that's a good idea. Like, why? Why don't you think that's good? It's not gonna go well. Like, people are going to think that I'm stealing something. Like, this is real. And she's like, that's ridiculous. That's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. And literally, as soon as I cross the threshold of that garage, at least 4 people come running out, accusing me of stealing something out of the garage. You know, not to say that they would have done that to anybody, but I knew, because I had experienced things like this, that it was going to be an issue with me running through this neighborhood with this lacrosse stick through this garage. And that's just another experience that I had where, you know, race kind of changes how people react to certain situations. My third story is me and my mom were driving in West Baltimore a few blocks up from my house, and we were in our car, and the car says, just like you guys probably have Gilman stickers on the back of your car, we had a McDonough sticker on the back of our car. And we're driving to the gym, and we get pulled over. That's crazy. The cop says, you know, pull over, get out of the car, you know, you ran a red light. My mom didn't run a red light. He proceeds to rip her out of the car. We're going to work out, mind you. Rip her out of the car, calls Child Protective Services that we need a paddy wagon. He's trying to put her on the ground. It was a crazy situation, you know, and nothing actually became of it. She was able to get back in the car. He kind of backed off, and we were able to proceed on our way. But I know that that incident would not have happened in Roland Park. You know, how we were treated that day happened because apparently this police officer believed that someone from the county, somebody from McDonough, was coming into the city to probably, you know, buy something or do something they weren't supposed to do. And, you know, we were kind of profiled in that way and assaulted in that way and spoken to in that way, like we were people that did not belong there. And I knew at that point that I just had an experience that, you know, because of the way we looked or where we were or the McDonough sticker in the back, we were treated differently. My fourth story is my craziest one. And, you know, I was just at UVA. I was an assistant for 4 years, and I applied to the job at Mount St. Mary's. I'm sitting there talking to the president of the university, and he's telling me, you know, how much we value diversity, and you'd be great for this school, and we'd love to have you. There's only one issue. There's going to be faculty members at this school that will have an issue with your appointment because you are African American in the sport of lacrosse. And I just couldn't believe that one, he would admit that, two, that he would say it to me. You know, it's one thing to just think it, but to say it to me. And I was in the state of Virginia for 4 years. You know, I'm back in Maryland. Things are supposed to be different, but they aren't. And, you know, I knew that my race in the sport of lacrosse stood for something that day. I knew that it was important for me to keep my position and be an example for other young women who want to be in the sport or other young men who want to be in the sport, because there's not too many of me. You know, there's 100 women's lacrosse programs, maybe 120, and I think there are 3 African American coaches, me being one of them. You know, and there's just not enough representation. So, you know, I do have my MBA, and some days, you know, these kids drive me crazy, which I'm sure other teachers in this room can attest to. You know, kids can drive you crazy. And I want to get out and do other things and, you know, explore the world, but I know it means something in the lacrosse community for me to have the position that I have, and I know that I can affect a lot of change from the platform that I have been given, and I try to do that every day because I think that the sport of lacrosse can give access and opportunity to a lot of kids that need it, especially in this community in Baltimore City. I think if we could really expand the scope of lacrosse, we could really give young kids opportunities at education, and much like what you boys are experiencing today. And that's kind of my message of trying to spread the growth of the game and help people get into the sport and promote it. And that's my framework for my story, for the most part. I have one quote, when you learn, teach, when you get, give. And that's pretty much how I try to live my life. You know, I've learned so much through the sport and through McDonough and UVA, so I try to give it back. And hopefully I was able to give, you know, part of my experience to one of you today that maybe shocked you or didn't shock you or surprised you, or, you know, I just want to continue the conversation of lacrosse and race and helping people. So thank you guys for allowing me to speak with you today. And we're supposed to have a little bit of questions. Yeah. 2 minutes. It's 120 seconds. We can do this.
Any questions?
Yes, sir. That's a really great question. Educating people on my lacrosse team about what's insensitive. You're kind of talking about, like, you know, can you ask somebody about their hair, things like that. I definitely think there's a time and a place for things, for questions, and being sincere and genuine needs to be a part of that conversation. You know, it's one thing to sincerely not know something and you're not educated about something and to ask a question, and then it's another thing to jokingly ask something and not be sincere or genuine or really want to know. You know, you have to at some level understand that questions that make someone feel different are sensitive. You know, questions about things that, you know, put somebody out of or create an other are sensitive questions. So ask them in environments where you can actually have thoughtful discussion, not just throwing things out there. Yes, sir. That was my official visit, yes. Good question. Okay, so I'm going to tell you why I went to UVA, and this is not a good answer, but I didn't have to take math. Right? Remember what I said? I was an English major. I do not do well at math. I got my MBA, which, you know, I regret not doing well in math and applying myself in mathematics. And, you know, I pretty much took the path of least resistance, which I'm sure there's many young men in the room that do the same thing in high school. I took the path of least resistance, like, oh, I don't have to do math? Here I go over here. You know, I don't have to do things that I'm not good at? Great, I'm gonna go over here. I'm good at sports. I stuck to that lane. But later in life, I found out that getting my MBA probably would have been way easier had I gone above functions and applications in high school. You know, I had to then take statistics and economics and accounting with absolutely no foundation. So I do not suggest that. You should apply yourself now, because later it gets much harder. Yes.
Okay, well, thank you.
Oh, thank you.
If you have any other questions or would like to talk with Coach Morgan some more, she'll be in the Gilman room for some lunch right now. Any other announcements before we head off?
What's up?